is up, everybody? Love you guys. Check this out. Welcome to another episode of the Bowman Legacies podcast, where we're brought to you by, of course, Bowman Legacies. Check us out at www.bowmanlegacies.com/lead from the middle and begin your journey today at growing as a person, not just a leader, but a well-rounded person. At Bowman Legacies, we're constantly focused on the whole person. We don't just talk about leadership. We talk about you. We talk about you facing you and oversimplifying personal growth and leadership. So again, check us out at www.bowmanlegacies.com/lead from the middle and begin your journey at building a legacy that will far surpass your legend. What's up, everybody? I'm Michael Bowman, your host today. And today I want to give you something. I want to give you something that has absolutely changed the course of how I react. As a young man, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you see I am no longer. As they say, I am a man of a certain age. As a young man, I felt as though when you asked me a question or I was put into any situation, I needed to react right away. I almost treated every single thing like a life or death situation. And honestly, I know why I did it and I don't know why. I know that I was imprinted very young, at a very young age, to make it feel as though very small things were life and death. I know that as a certain age, I had, frankly, a lot of ego. Sometimes we have a lot of ego. I also know that testosterone and a primal instinct had a lot to do with it as well. But as you grow in wisdom, you realize not everything is life and death. How many of those people that you work with, or maybe you yourself are this person, I will describe me at a young age. I always felt I had to have an answer to everything. One, I didn't want to be deemed as stupid. I had the kind of managers that if I didn't have an immediate answer, I was in trouble. And feeling that kind of vulnerability, like your job is on the line, wasn't a big deal for me when I was younger. And it didn't become a big deal until we had our first kid. As a matter of fact, I was very hard on bosses. I was probably the last guy someone wanted to be a boss to, because you weren't motivating me via fear. You weren't saying do this or you'll get fired, or don't do this or don't do that. You needed to come at me with logic. You needed to come at me with understanding, or you weren't getting out of me what you had hoped. But after we had our first child, everything seemed to matter just that much more, because I knew losing a job may have affected me a little bit before because I'd always bounce back, but now I know it's going to affect this little precious baby girl that came into my life. And it really started me wondering, why do I react so fast? Why do I always have to be right? Why do I always feel as though every circumstance is life or death? And why am I such a big personality? And why am I always in people's faces right away and quick to dominate? Well, I realized when looking back, and especially through a lot of soul searching and reminiscing, a lot of meditation, and a lot of counseling. Yeah, I went to counseling for a while, and I still get wise counsel today. At 51 years old, I find great value in someone else looking at my issues and helping me to sort them out. It's because they're not holding so white-knuckled to that issue, that added voice, that three-dimensional look, or that higher altitude look at what I'm involved in, so helps me to reflect and look at myself as I'm really functioning in the world around me. Now, that all being said, I realized that many times being raised in school and not doing great in grade school, I always felt dumb. And I even had teachers tell me that I was stupid. Thank you, Mr. Hammett, for actually saying to my face in front of a whole class that I was dumb when I actually was asking genuine questions. Boy, that didn't make me feel stupid. And the more that I didn't do well in school, the more I wasn't getting that kind of affirmations at home, and the adults in my life at that time were confirming that I was dumb, I became very defensive, and it hurt me when people saw less of me or thought less of me. And because of my ego, instead of looking at things logically, guys, I looked at things very emotionally. And emotion, when you lead life on emotion, one, it's not sustainable. It will wear you out and the people that share life with you. Two, I was really finding myself looking ignorant, opening my mouth in times where it just absolutely didn't need to be open. And I've seen this many times in places that I've coached for businesses, and I'll be in an executive meeting, and inevitably someone needs to feel as though they have to say something, or somehow they're not valid of their post. Well, first and foremost, that organization has put you there. So you are valid. You are worthy of your post. Secondly, I don't like to speak in those meetings if I don't have something to say that pertains to moving whatever issue is being brought up forward. But it's easy to allow fear and ego to lead the way. It is easy to feel as though you have to have an answer. It is easy to feel like you have to be defensive. And this is where wisdom comes into play. I was imprinted in my youth to feel like everything was an emergency, and if I didn't have an answer, I was in very bad trouble. But as I've grown older and wiser, I've become more steadied in that. And what that steadiness comes from, the heart of it, believe it or not, is accepting that I'm not perfect, nor will I ever be. Just accepting that. And then loving myself. Truly, honest to God, loving myself even amidst my failures and my faults and my shortcomings. I find it is in that moment of loving yourself, realizing you're never going to be perfect, you give yourself a lot more grace. And then when you do fall short, it's easier to recoup and get back on that path of whatever you're trying to accomplish, because you're not beating yourself up for when you fall short. You're looking at things more logically and seeing how you fell short. And I hope I'm coming across clearly today. But the moment I realized that I was a jerk, the moment that I realized that I was overreacting all the time, the moment I realized why, there was a long path to rectifying that, and I still fall short. And what ends up happening is, somewhere along the lines, I get caught off guard. Fear takes over, ego takes over, and I overreact. Still happens today, but nowhere near as often. That was my default. That was before my constant reaction to everything. And what you have to do is realize that sometimes your life isn't at stake when you're trying to figure out where you're going to eat. Your life isn't at stake when you're trying to bring your point across at work. Your life isn't at stake when you're trying to make your point to your spouse. This is not a life or death moment. No one's got a gun to your head. And you've got to realize you're in a safe place. You've got to realize that you are in a safe place. Now, look, I understand there are people that have come from war-torn situations. I know people have PTSD from their childhood and from being warriors. I understand all of that. I do. So I'm not describing being in actual danger. But wisdom tells me when I'm talking to my wife about what we're going to do with our finances and I feel passionately about something, the moment she doesn't feel the same way, I don't overreact and try to force her to my side. Because not only do I love myself in that moment, I love her more than that situation. That's one thing you've got to ask yourself, especially at home, when you're dealing with your children, when you're dealing with your spouse. When I'm getting so angry, is this really just fear taking over because I can't control the situation? And have I really come to realize that control is an illusion? And I can't control people because eventually they'll realize they're being controlled and they're no longer going to follow, but they're going to rebel against that, and it's only going to cause more problems. But working with people is truly the answer. Coming to situations and understanding and agreement together and then moving forward cohesively is the answer. And in order to do that, I need to put my ego and my fear aside and try to get to the bottom of things logically. In my work career, I'm going to tell you many times I've been a fireman. I've been a make it happener. I've been the guy that was sent to situations that could not be fixed and came out fixing them when no one else could. Why? Because I stopped allowing other people to make me feel pressure for the problems they created. Okay, hold on now. That was really good. And this was one of those things that changed the course of my life. I stopped allowing people making me feel pressure for problems they created. The next thing that I did was understand that with all the fear and anger and yelling, I'm not going to move the needle here because that's exactly what got us into this problem in the first place. All this fear, all this posturing, all of this guilt and shaming created this horrible problem. But instead, I need to look at things logically, and especially where I was involved, and see where I fell short, what got me there, and how I need to move forward. Too many of us put so much emotion on whether or not we're perfect, or whether or not we are winning, or whether or not we're going to get blamed for this or for that. And I understand there are certain households and companies that have that kind of culture. And if you're a leader today, you're a president of an organization, you got to ask yourself if that's the kind of culture that you've harbored, that you've created. That kind of culture encourages people to lie, encourages people to try to throw other people under the bus and pass blame. But the right culture that's going to move you forward and help you to engage, empower, and innovate is the kind of culture, whether at home or at work, that when somebody owns their stuff, you praise them for them, and then you support them to help them to move forward. So for me, I had to realize again that I was in a safe place. I had to love myself. I had to realize when other people were putting pressure on me to fix problems they created, hey, you created the problem. I'm not going to allow that to make me feel pressure. So I'm going to help these people to move forward. And one of the most beautiful things that I can give you today is what I call the standing 8 count. There is an old saying that even a fool, when he is silent, is deemed as wise. In other words, when you're over there shutting up, you can be a total idiot, and people will think you're pretty smart because you're not over there just gassing off on what you think the answer to any given problem is. But that old saying reigns true. Now, the standing 8 count comes from boxing. And it comes from a situation where someone who was very much on death's door was not given the opportunity for the ref to look at him and to make sure this guy could defend himself. And in that, he did die in the ring. And the standing 8 count for us at Bowman Legacies is simply this. Instead of feeling like you need to react, you need to jump on it, you need to move forward, you need to take, destroy. Take 8 seconds. 8 seconds before you respond. Take that standing 8 count, remembering that even if a fool, if he's silent, is deemed as wise, and use that moment to think. First off, I'm in a safe place. Second off, I love me and this other person, and this situation isn't more important than the other person. And I want to be the voice of reason. And if I'm going to be the voice of reason, I have to be the one that's bringing logic, reason, looking at trends and commonalities, and finding answers. I had to do that for myself because so often, especially in the non-for-profit space, I had people that had life or death situations in their lives. I had people that I talked to that had come out of federal prison. I had people that I had talked to that were dealing with drug addiction. I had people that I talked to that had lost their children. The state had taken them and had deemed them unfit to parent. These people needed someone not to panic. These people needed a voice of reason to help them to move forward and help them to feel like they had hope. Look, institute this standing 8 count. That's your only homework this week. When things arise, just wait 8 seconds. It's not that big a deal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then respond. Let logic be the thing that comes out of your mouth. Allow you in horrible situations to be the one who's actually the voice of reason, the voice of logic. Allow you to be the one when someone's coming at you about your character, you're willing to listen, taking that standing 8 count to see what logic lies in there and to see, hey, maybe you are in the wrong. You don't always have to be right. You're in a safe place. Try that standing 8 count this week. Try it. And remember, I'm not looking down at you. I got more issues in Time Magazine. If you've tuned in today to look for a guy with perfection, you're looking at the wrong guy. We're rowing in the same boat. Turn around. I'm right behind you. Get your oar in the water. We got places to go. Hey, look, if you haven't heard it from somebody this week, I'm going to tell you right now, I love you. I love you. If the good Lord can love me right where I'm at, I sure as in heck can love you. You're not a loser. You're not a piece of garbage. You're not a piece of crap. You are absolutely someone who has greatness within you, and you can choose to follow that greatness and make decisions according to that greatness. Start loving you right where you're at, and that's where you're going to start to improve. Keep going. Keep growing. Keep building that legacy that will far surpass your legend and inspiring others to do the same. And that, my friends, is how we change the world. And oh, by the way, check us out at www.bowmanlegacies.com/lead from the middle, where you can get more teachings like this that are far more in depth and will jettison you and 10x you into the leader you always hoped to be. Thanks for tuning in.